Alrighty, you should be watching this only if you are in the most exciting fourth period AP class ever. If you are not in the most exciting fourth period AP class ever, then you should not be watching this video. You should be watching period second and period three, or period two and period three. Alrighty, we left off on Friday on the areas of disagreement which they had to compromise. And we first started talking about the election of the president. We went over these different things. And remember, all three of these essentially get involved in the election of the president. And so we left off there. Remember, there's 435 members in the House of Representatives, 535 total. You have the number, then you need 270 electoral college votes to win. The first to get the 270 is the first to win the presidency and win that the election for that. Now let's take a look at the representation of Congress, or representation among the states, and what the issue is. It's basically going to be small states versus big states and the area of representation. And like your notes are saying, the large states favored the Virginia plan based upon population. That's going to be the House of Representatives. Or excuse me, that's going to be, well, it will be the House of Representatives. Small states favor the New Jersey plan, equal representation. This is going to lead to the creation of the senators, because remember, we have equal senators. So what's going to happen is the large states wanted this, the small states wanted this. What are we going to get? Well, you get and this is in bold, very important for you to know, the Connecticut or the Great Compromise. This is a bicameral legislation with a popularly elected House based upon population. That's the House of Representatives. And then you also get a Senate, which equal representation. And this says elected by state legislation or legislators. This was the case until the 17th Amendment. So realize at this time it's elected by state legislatures, which is basically a good old boys network. So this again, these are three very important things here: the Virginia plan, New Jersey plan, and the Great Compromise. So we resolved that issue. We resolved the representation among the states issue with the Great Compromise. Now what about the representation and taxation of the slaves? And as we learn about U.S. history from Mr. Del Ordo, Mr. Stevens, and Mrs. McEwen, whoever else taught you, there is black eyes in our history. Every country has a black eye. Every country has things they're not proud of. Every individual has things that they've done in the past they're not proud of. Well, this is ours. One of our many things. This, the treatment of the Native Americans, and such and such. So the representation and the taxation of the slaves, how are we going to figure that out when it comes to this, to representation in Congress? Well, the northern states wanted slaves to count for taxation, but not for representation. And think, why would they want that? The northern states wanted to count for taxation, so more money is taken from the south, or the southern states, but not for representation. They don't want those slaves, so that means there's less people from the south or the southern states in the House of Representatives. So that's what they were thinking there. The southern states wanted the opposite, which means they wanted the slaves to count for representation and not necessarily taxation. You've got to remember, unfortunately, look at the Dred Scott decision. Slaves are considered to be pieces of property, not individuals and not people at this time. So that's where we're kind of at that point right now. So then we come up with the 3/5 compromise. So the 3/5 compromise says 3/5 of the states of the slaves would count for both purposes, which means they would count for taxation and representation. This 3/5 compromise is how we solve this problem right there. So if anything asks you about the 3/5 compromise, you really got to talk and think about it. It had to do with the representation and taxation of the slaves. And so, Great Compromise solved this one, and the Three-Fifths Compromise solved that one. So, moving on, and we are going to look at real quick the ratification politics. And I mean by ratification, the ratification of the Constitution. You're going to have two groups of people. And if you remember your U.S. history class, the two groups of people are going to be the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists were the supporters of the Constitution. And so they wanted the Constitution as it is written. They, or who were they? Property owners, creditors, merchants. Their views is the elites most fit to govern. Remember, how do we define elite? And we defined elites with money, which equals access. And there's different types of elites. If you remember those three theories, you should know those. The Marxist, the C. Wright Mills, and the Max Weber. Those three versions of actually who leads us. The second is they feared the excesses of democracy. And what are those excesses of democracy? A lot of it dealing with the people, a lot of it dealing with giving the common man the right to vote and those different things. And they also favored a strong central government. They thought that a strong central government would maintain order and protect property and also maintain freedom. So that's what the Federalists really believed there. Who are the leaders? It says here Hamilton, Madison, Washington, and Jay. And so realize who the Federalists are and what they wanted. I'm going to kind of go down here real quick to the Federalist advantages real quick. What is the Federalist advantages? Well, the advantages for the Federalists are they were better represented in state legislatures. They controlled the press, and that's huge. Why is controlling the press big when you're trying to get people? Remember, the Constitution is they just written it. Now they got to get it adopted by 9 of the 13 states in order for it to be ratified and overthrow the Articles of Confederation. So if you control the press, what do you control in essence? What are you controlling in any society? Think about it. Answer it. Let me know tomorrow. But you guys are smart enough to understand why that's very, very, very important. Begin ratification procedures quickly before Anti-Federalists could get organized. Because again, think about who the Federalists are. And realize, I want to talk about D in a little bit, but they do agree to the Bill of Rights after the ratification of the Constitution. But they also wrote the Federalist Papers. Madison, Hamilton, and Jay, they wrote them. What are they? They're to rally support for the ratification of the Constitution. Notice it's in bold. You know what that means. Very important. And the ratification was in 1788. Okay, but I'm going to go back up here. So that's the Federalists. Well, who are the Anti-Federalists? Well, the Anti-Federalists are ones that liked the old government. Think of them as being kind of the Republicans, more state rights kind of thing. Strong. This would be like a Democrat belief. Strong central government, weaker state rights. Stronger state rights, kind of more of a Republican ideology here. Here's what is important. Here's what you got to know. Here's what you must star. They wanted, because they did not trust the Constitution as written because of our past, they wanted a Bill of Rights. Once again, the Anti-Federalists wanted a Bill of Rights, something to guarantee their personal freedom, our personal freedoms. Understand that. Know that. Again, they love themselves some state rights. Supporters are small farmers, frontiersmen, debtors, and shopkeepers. What are their views? Feared concentration of power in the hands of elites. Interesting. You almost can ask yourself, do we have that problem today? Is that an issue with our democracy today? Even though they got their wish, but is that an issue with democracy today? They believe that government should be closer to the people. How do you go about doing that? You got to kind of start to think about how do you make the government closer to the people. Feared strong central government favored stronger state governments. Very important. They thought the Constitution has too much power, and so with the stronger state governments, they want more power at the state level rather than on the federal level. So that's what that's saying: more power at the state level rather than at the federal level. Think about this: states should have sovereignty, which means they should rule themselves, and the federal government should not play that big part in that. That's what they felt. You kind of leave the federal government out, let the states kind of handle their own issues. Another thing they thought within the Constitution, that too much power was in the executive branch, and that would be kind of like a king or dictator, something we were trying to get away from. Number 4 is they feared the lack of Bill of Rights. Their strongest argument: circle it, highlight it, understand it. Okay? Again, a strong central government would threaten their rights. Because how does the central government know what the state of California needs? Now think about it. That's what they don't know. Who's better to represent the state of California other than people that live in California, right? People that live in California, we know what we want. We know what we need. Does Washington, D.C. know what we need? That's what they're saying. Yes, I know that California wasn't around at this time. It wasn't in our possession, I should say. But that's what they're kind of getting at. How can we let these people, even though we have delegates, but the federal government really doesn't necessarily know what every little area needs. Placer County is unique. And so we need to have our laws that are a little bit different. And so let the officials of Placer County, let the state of California worry about Placer County. Let the federal government worry about other mundane tasks. And this is the anti-federalist speaking, not, again, what I'm saying, but this is just kind of their belief. They, again, wanted most of the power, now this is interesting, should go to the legislative branch rather than like the executive branch or even the judicial branch. So they thought, because think about the legislative branch, you have the senators and you have the House Representatives, more of the will of the people there. Okay? So that's a big thing there. And then we've already talked about this. Again, think of another advantages for the Federalist Papers. Just looking at my notes, they again believe in the shared power, separation of powers, the strong central government, checks and balances. They didn't want a Bill of Rights. They already thought there was enough guaranteed rights within the Constitution, and the Constitution would take care of it themselves. And the big thing here on the very bottom, look at number 4, is each Federalist paper that was written had a specific idea they would talk about. And so the Federalists believed the Constitution was what government can do. And let's not limit what government can do by putting a bunch of Bill of Rights. Because think about it, doesn't the Bill of Rights limit what the government can do? Don't you put rules and regulations on the government by giving us a Bill of Rights? And so that's why they didn't believe in that. And also the Federalists believed in electing members of only one branch, the legislative branches. And the other 2 branches not elected, which, again, that's kind of a tricky situation. But that's what they believed. When you think about it, elected by the people, and we kind of we had it back then. The senators were elected by state legislatures, and the president, yes, elected by the will of the people, but the Electoral College really elects that. So they kind of get their way there in that. So anyway, so there is that. You should have all this down. We should be ready to go tomorrow with our activities. We will start Principles of the Constitution, maybe a little bit in class tomorrow, and then when we don't finish, I will do it here. If you have any questions, write them down. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Alrighty?